And then we brought up a couple of other issues right at the end regarding what, as I spent yesterday giving you the outline of the facts regarding the difference between contrails and chemtrails, and everything from the White House senior science advisor's admission to it to NASA getting caught and go, well, we're not the only one chemtrailing. Go yell at them. Chemtrails, just like sunrises, exist. Now, what's in them on any given day? Many don't know. What their ultimate purposes are, depending upon the formations, bring up many other hypotheses, as well as with data points from HAARP, as well as the NSA, as well as NORAD. It's rather easy to piece together a puzzle. Many of you, of course, listen to the American Freedom Network for an individual named Alex Jones. Alex Jones, Infowars.com. And for many years, Alex pointed out to anyone who would listen, who was in the media, when you know the truth, you have to speak out. Whether it's your own podcast, whether it's your own blog, whether it's your own pictures, but the truth is not something we believe. The truth is the truth. Coming out of Pocatello, Idaho, as a weatherman, Scott Stevens has taken a rather remarkable journey, and a lot of that documented at weatherwars.info. But please welcome to Free America, Scott Stevens. Good afternoon, Scott.
Glad to be with you today. Glad to be with you.
I want to talk about the early days, back when you were a weatherman at Pocatello, and I'm saying that is correct? Pocatello, Idaho.
Yeah, that was my last stop in mainstream media. It started when I was a kid in eastern Idaho as well. Fascinated with weather at 12, 13, 14 years old. Was mentored by a weatherman there, so it's kind of only natural towards the end of my broadcast career that I would end up back there, which was kind of appropriate.
What was red flagging you within the world of, was it still weatherman, or was the word meteorology being thrown around back then?
Oh, well, both of them appropriate.
Okay.
Absolutely both of them.
What were the things that were coming up that were having you ask questions that everybody else wasn't?
My accuracy, to be honest with you. I'm very good. Very, very good. And, as I just mentioned, I had a mentor when I was in high school, starting in TV, being mentored when I was, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, and my first job when I was still in high school. I went off to Kansas, and by the time I was done with my sophomore year in college, I was on the air in Topeka.
Okay.
And before I finished, I took a job up at Omaha at RFD TV, doing agricultural forecasting and pipeline and commodities and all of those kind of forecasts that big money is based upon. Big money moves with the first bit of intelligence that there's a change on the horizon.
Our last guest that had nothing to do with biblical prophecy is talking about big money and, again, forcing a worldwide drought, etc. And then we have these, I described yesterday, it's an 1880s solid oak table. It has 4 sturdy legs. The base of the table is 2 to 3 inches thick. And on top of that table, Scott, are documents from World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, Indiana, Minneapolis, Miami, Russia. Beijing was the classic. The world's attention was going to be focused on Beijing, and they openly admitted to weather modification to make the sky appear blue. And no one...
Well, they get away with this by saying we're simply cloud seeding. And I like to, in Idaho, on the air, Idaho Power was doing the cloud seeding, and they openly admitted we get 13% more moisture when we cloud seed than when we don't. And each 1% of increase of rainfall run through their hydroelectric plants generated revenue for that company.
And
so again, it came back to money.
Okay. So help us then understand the transformation of leaving mainstream broadcasting as a weatherman and beginning your weather war on the internet through weatherwars.info.
Well, I go back to the late 90s when I was struggling and the guys in D.C. were openly struggling in their discussions about accuracy. Winter storms were coming inland and over these winters. You would forecast 2, 4, 5, 6 inches worth of snow. We'd get a trace, maybe an inch. The resorts, the snowpack areas, the highway departments, you'd forecast 8 to 16 up at those higher elevations, and they would get 2 to 3 to 4. And that completely changes, the outcome of the event. And I kept asking, WTF is going on? What's going on? And I came across Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Bearden's work at his website, Cheniere.org, CHENIERE.org. And he had a little sidebar called Soviet Weather Engineering.
And
that began my trip down the rabbit hole.
Forgive me real quick, Scott. We do have to take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to start right there with the Lieutenant Colonel, okay?
All right.
Fair enough. Our guest today from weatherwars.info, Scott Stevens, on the American Freedom Network. We'll be back.
Nutritional Balancing by GoHealthyNext.com will expertly assist you in optimizing your metabolism, teach you safe detoxification techniques, and help you rebuild your health. Eileen Durfee, a Dr. Wilson practitioner, specializes in programs and resources that will assist you in repairing your health using scientific methods. If you have fatigue, stress, pain, cravings, inflammation, negative emotions, and adverse reactions, you need to get Nutritional Balancing and GoHealthyNext.com. That's GoHealthyNext.com. GoHealthyNext.com.
Great Plains Power has been providing reliable electrical power systems in the Rocky Mountain area since 1992. Our systems rely on the sun to help make you self-reliant for your power needs. Solar energy can be scaled to fit any situation, from complete power independence to backup power for the short term. Our expertise focuses on standalone power, but we have extensive experience with utility interactive systems as well. Custom-tailored capabilities as modest as emergency lighting all the way to commercial-scale power. Great Plains Power is a full-service company. We service everything we sell. We provide and design turnkey packages, custom-designed system, and parts for do-it-yourself. With more than 20 years of specialized experience at your disposal, let us know what your power concerns or goals are. Reach us by phone or the internet. Call 303-239-9963. That's 303-239-9963. Or go to GreatPlainsSolar.com. Now this is the testimony of John when the Jews sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, "Who are you?" He confessed and did not deny, but confessed, "I am not the Messiah." And they asked him, "What then? Are you Elijah?" He said, "I am not." "Are you the prophet?" And he answered, "No." The Gospel of John, chapter 1, verse 19 through 21.
We are back to free America, to free the minds, the hearts, the souls, and to bring the Republic back. Randy Yarborough will, of course, be back in the chair next week. My name is Daniel Wilde. You can find me on the World Wide Web via Facebook, Daniel Wilde, W-I-L-D-E. The Twitter feed is what I'm using the most. The symbol at the Dan Wilde as well with an E. And before we get any further, I did promote his website, Alex Jones, of course, Infowars.com. Scott taking it to a level, weatherwars.info. But Scott's also very active in social media. And Scott, I want to go back to the time of your mentoring and then leaving and your introduction to a lieutenant colonel. But let's shamelessly plug your social media for listeners who want to go find you like you friend you while you're on the show.
Yeah, Twitter is at WeatherWarsInfo or ScottStevens.1276 for Facebook. So you can find me that way.
So on the Twitter, it's actually the symbol at Weather Wars. Yeah, the symbol.
Info.
But again,
Weather Wars Info.
At Weather Wars Info, no dot.
Yep, no dot.
Got it. Okay.
Dot's getting away in that symbology.
Okay.
No,
I
was already a little curious about what was happening with the weather. Things were changing. The global warming hoopla was getting bigger and bigger. And I was kind of on board with that because I was seeing odd weather events. And there's a part of me, probably from the time I was born, that something big was going to happen during the course of my life. Something big. That just seemed to be wired in my beingness. And so I was kind of, up on disasters and big events and those kind of things. I was always drawn to those events. And so if global warming is a precursor to something, then let's just follow this to the end. But when I got into Colonel Bearden's work, there was scalar technology. It was the Russians versus the U.S. We were leveraging Tesla's work from the teens, 20s, and 30s of the previous century, in today's day and age. And the Russians began their weather works or weaponry across the U.S. in 1976.
And yet,
I was
in the 50s, they openly admitted they controlled the weather.
Brave, aren't they, to be able to say that? And after World War II and after D-Day in particular, the Office of Weather Modification and Weather Control in the White House was initiated in 1952. So this has been a high priority item for 70 years. 70 years. This has been something that they have wanted to have under their thumb. And so it only makes sense that when you employ enough physicists, enough resources, and enough vision and leadership, that a task is going to get accomplished. And so Colonel Bearden's work, to me, was the red flag that what is happening with our climate isn't the chaos because of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Oh, God, that's fertilizer for plants. But from something else, something a little more nefarious. And on his website, there were pictures of clouds that I, as a classically trained meteorologist, could not explain. There were shapes and lines and resonance patterns that can only happen when there's the resonance, a kinemax kind of shape introduced into a gas or a liquid. That was the only explanation. And so in 2001, I bought a digital camera, gave up film forever, and started taking these snapshots. And as it began to frame the sky and frame the clouds, I began looking for these things. Instead of dismissing them as, oh, well, that's kind of cool, or isn't that curious? No, I began looking for them. So my awareness had grown to the point where I was looking for them. And I had already become aware of the term chemtrails because I was a Rense.com reader. Always in alternative media, because once you're in traditional media, you know how little of the story is presented.
Yeah, and Jeff Rense does a great job at Rense.com putting up stories that Americans would otherwise not see.
Yep, and so I was seeing the term chemtrail. And I'm like, oh, goodness sakes, guys, do we really need another conspiracy?
And so,
must we go down this road? Must my sacred cow, the weather, now be subject to conspiracy?
That's what I wanted to ask, because you'd mentioned the time lapse or the photographs. Some of your time lapse videos are awe-inspiring for people like me who want to get into more digital media and show the truth. But yes, as you brought that up, it almost sounds to me, and it's much like now the world-renowned Dr. Stanton Friedman. He's the #1 ufologist from MIT. He got into it the UFOs. No. 2 weeks and I'm going to have this whole thing debunked and we're going to go on with our lives. It almost sounds to me as if that was now your goal. Because what I heard from you is, all right, another conspiracy. That's the last thing we need. We need the truth.
And to myself, I thought I have all of the tools and the education to prove or disprove this. And I was going to disprove it. That was my aim.
Okay.
That was my aim. And this was 2002. By 2003, within 1 year, I had collected enough pictures that I'm going, oh, God, there's something happening here. By 2004, I had subscribed to high-resolution satellite imagery from a company called WeatherTap.com because they provided imagery that I couldn't get on a broad enough scale in the YouTube.
Scott, your cells breaking.
$2,500 a month on data. I wasn't getting what I wanted.
Scott, I don't know if you moved, but your cell's breaking up a little bit.
Is it? It's these darn VoIP lines.
Okay.
These.
What was the name of the weather satellite subscription you subscribed to? That's when you started to break up.
Weather tap, and it's like $7.95 a month.
Okay.
This is a minimal expense, and so I subscribed to Weather Tap and started archiving imagery because I need a database, I need a library.
Okay.
But by 2004, it was June 6th, June 7th of 2004, there was one satellite image that I looked at and just saw patterns and geometry. My stomach sunk because I realized that what they had a hold of was the entire planet's weather system. Everything was constrained by resonant ELF, ULF waves. Something was holding the weather back.
I've tried to point that out, that because of social media, one advantage to those of us who can see chemtrails, you see them from Paris, Texas to Paris, France. You can't now not see them. It is a global event. It's not something going on in the Southwest or the Midwest or the Northeast. It's clearly going on around the world. And I've also pointed out to listeners on another show the reality that even mainstream television commercials, Scott, are now showing the sunset, and there's 3 classic streaks across the horizon.
Dan,
those are chemtrails.
You can't go out and shoot a sitcom, a movie, a commercial without getting this stuff in the sky intentionally or inadvertently. It's that ubiquitous.
So
try as the producer and the photographer may to avoid this stuff, they can't help it. The other side is, as a photographer, it adds dimension to the image you're shooting. It adds an aspect to it. It either accentuates the car, it accentuates the power, it accentuates it.
Okay, I see that for media purposes, yes, you're right. Instead of a car on the asphalt and the blue sky, we have a car on the asphalt with a blue sky, and we have objects in it, so it provides that extra layer of depth. I can see that.
Exactly.
All right, and now we're back to the fundamentals of neurolinguistic programming, so that this is just...
It all begins with the tongue.
Well, but this is just normal. This is completely normal. There's nothing abnormal about that. Now, so you've brought up now we're in 2004, August of 2004.
And I still didn't know where chemtrails fit into this. But my worldview changed, how I forecast changed, how I talk to my audience had changed. Because I understood why, for the past 8 years, my accuracy and why I could do everything and understand what was happening operationally with meteorology and still provide my audience at 5, 6, and 10 o'clock a forecast that was inaccurate. I had that delta. I had that variable that could not be identified. I understood that and I knew what it was, but I still didn't know what the bloody heck the chemtrails were. So what I did was, in the beginning of 2005, I bought 4 cameras, 2 computers, and time-lapse software. And I wired the house. And I had these cameras turn on at sunrise and turn off at sunset. I'd come home from the 10 o'clock news and sit down and render these movies. And they'd take a picture every 4 or 5 or 6 seconds, depending on the day. 4 months in, I saw a series of chemtrail flights on an April afternoon on a blue sky day, just a few cumulus puffing. But there were about 12 flights, all with relatively short trails except for one. This one segment of a trail, not the whole thing, but just a segment of the trail persisted. And what then happened were 2 other planes, again with smaller trails, intercepted the exact middle and the precise end of the remnant of that other trail. I then understood that because there was a resonant geometry that was constraining our weather, that they were using these trails to align these waveforms. And then to measure what these waves were doing to the atmosphere.
Now, you bring up the geometry because many times we will see just a series of horizontal lines going across the horizon. Many times we'll see the photographs on social media of the checkerboard grid. We'll also see the diamond grid. I've nicknamed it the anarchist logo, but it's like the triangle with the extensions on all sides. And I know that each of them, many of course is okay. All right, Dan, fine. So what is that? Well, I know what it's not. It's not exhaust out of an aircraft, because exhaust dissipates. It does not expand and turn into clouds. But in the geometry that you mentioned on that day where you saw the line, and then one intersecting, my understanding is the top, and then another intersecting through the middle, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. So what happens is in your little A shape that you just described, if you time-lapse that, and just almost everyone has an Android or iPhone at this point, and there's a time-lapse app that you can get for under $2 called Lapse It. $2. $2 and you're in the time-lapse business.
Lapse It.
And what I discovered from these cameras is that one of those chemtrails will essentially be attached to a fly with the wind. But the other one, at an angle, will just like you're running one pencil across another pencil, move completely independent of the other trail, or more importantly, the clouds and the wind.
Okay.
So, as my understanding of the physics and
when you say that, you mean remaining stationary as the other clouds are moving?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The chemtrails do not move as a unit. They're all moving independently of each other. So it's like one trail has 5 micron-sized particles, the other one has 9, the other one has 2, another one has 14. So they're all in various sizes, and then they're all attached to a different resonant frequency.
Now we know.
So as one is resonating and being pulled along electrically into one direction, while the other is sliding across it, and another one is moving on in an entirely different direction.
Okay.
And you create clouds by these layers of the atmosphere shearing against each other. Right. Like you have two hands, you're rubbing them atop each other with friction.
Right.
And what happens?
Develops the
you
heat.
get little dirt balls.
Well, yeah, that's also true. But I get the friction analogy to generate the heat, which in theory would disperse rain to the ground. Within the patterns, are you able to correlate any data for a generic term, chemtrailing, unless you have a better term we should be using? Is there any correlation with the chemtrailing geometry, whether they're squares, grids, diamonds, etc., and HARP?
They're used for a couple of purposes. I think if you're going to target a weapon, you need to have a targeting mechanism.
All right.
You've got to lay a boundary out to where we're going to impact this side, we're going to impact the left side, the west side of this line in the sky. And so it will say pulse the sky over here. And I think this is far, far, far more likely that we are dealing with the technology that is aboard the aircraft.
See, and that's where I want to go coming after the bottom of the break, because you've mentioned we've been doing this 50 years, and that's the old prop aircraft. Well, we got the Boeing 747, 200, 300, 400, the A-20 Airbus, etc., and we know the lawsuits of Boeing and British Petroleum, and that's where I want to go with our guest, Scott Stevens, weatherwars.info. We'll be back.
If catastrophe struck, would your family be prepared? Are you confident you wouldn't react in a panic? Is there one place to get all of your emergency supplies? Ferris Survival encourages you to have confidence through preparation, not panic through crisis. Ferris Survival, located at 3366 South Broadway, is a professional, reputable, full-service business providing quality, realistic preparedness supplies at an affordable price. Go online, stop by, or call 303-781-0343. Ferris Survival.
Nutritional Balancing by GoHealthyNext.com will expertly assist you in optimizing your metabolism, teach you safe detoxification techniques, and help you rebuild your health. Eileen Durfee, a Dr. Wilson practitioner, specializes in programs and resources that will assist you in repairing your health using scientific methods. If you have fatigue, stress, pain, cravings, inflammation, negative emotions, and adverse reactions, you need to get Nutritional Balancing and GoHealthyNext.com. That's GoHealthyNext.com. GoHealthyNext.com.
Great Plains Power has been providing reliable electrical power systems in the Rocky Mountain area since 1992. Our systems rely on the sun to help make you self-reliant for your power needs. Solar energy can be scaled to fit any situation, from complete power independence to backup power for the short term. Our expertise focuses on standalone power, but we have extensive experience with utility interactive systems as well. Custom-tailored capabilities as modest as emergency lighting all the way to commercial-scale power. Great Plains Power is a full-service company. We service everything we sell. We provide and design turnkey packages, custom-designed system, and parts for do-it-yourself. With more than 20 years of specialized experience at your disposal, let us know what your power concerns or goals are. Reach us by phone or the internet. Call 303-239-9963. That's 303-239-9963. Or go to greatplainssolar.com.
Platteville Public Library encourages parents to remember that you're the most important person in your child's life. Please advise and encourage them to make responsible choices while supporting their efforts of education. Help teach them the way to combat the tough challenges they face constantly. This important reminder is from Platteville Public Library, on the air because they care about your child's literacy. For information on their programs, call 970-785-2231 and give your child the gift of literacy. Call them now for summer reading programs.
And of his fullness we have all received, and grace for grace. For the law was given through Moses, but grace and truth came through Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Christ. No one has seen God at any time. The only begotten Son, who is in the bosom of the Father, He has declared Him. The Gospel of John, chapter 1, verse 16.
Good afternoon, Babylon. Legendary broadcaster Randy Yarborough taking a few days to till the soil and do some harvesting, and I thought he was joking. I really thought he was pulling my leg, and I spoke with his wife Heather earlier today. He's in the middle of gathering wood for the winter. 40 cords of wood. Amazing. But prepping is what prepping is. We're also being told, get ready, because by 2030, a mini ice age is coming. We're being warned of some of the worst winters on record. Climate change, from the Vatican all the way back to Venice, Arizona. The people of Arizona now calling for their legislators. We got a cloud seed. Californians, we got a cloud seed. We've got to stop the drought. What are we to do? Our guest this afternoon has a very interesting take on what we take for granted. Here in Colorado, of course, the joke, don't like the weather? Wait 20 minutes. It'll change. And I jumped ahead of a question regarding weather modification, what we know as chemtrails, and I brought up HAARP. And I think I brought that up a little prematurely with our guest, Scott Stevens from weatherwars.info. Scott, I want to back up because when we were discussing earlier what we know as aerosol dispersion, now commonly called chemtrails, we know they've been doing this for 50 years. And in the old days, they were modifying aircraft to spray. We now know through, the lawsuits, the agreements with Boeing and British Petroleum, etc., that the chemicals are now in the aviation fuel itself. Many of the pilots don't even know what they're doing. And so I want to go back to the geometric patterns that you had discussed. Does HAARP...
I think what we ended up with two different fleets of airlines. When in the 70s they realized that this would be a sweet, sweet tool for climate control, weather modification, using the Earth as the newest tool of terrorism, eco-terrorism, they needed a whole other airline. They needed their own dedicated airline.
So just like Area 51 needed Janet, the government needed its own secret shadow airline.
And that's a very small operation, when compared to the probably upwards of 2,500 aircraft that are pulling off this operation globally.
Yes.
I believe the numbers are, between 900 and 1,200 on this side of the planet, and an equal number across Europe. And the planes and the trails have just begun to show up in South America in the last 7-8 years. So they're pushing the agenda. They're pushing, out into these other countries that we didn't have the Star Alliance or the open air treaties and so forth. But now those other nations have been browbeaten into submission, whether through earthquakes or through droughts or some other tool that's been brought into compliance.
How about political payoff to the government, because they don't care if the people are starving, they have millions?
Yes and no, but there's still some proud dictators out there, some proud regimes that don't need to be bothered by Americans. They certainly don't want American planes flying overhead. They're like, no. We know what you've done. You've got a history. You have a history, and it is not a good and honorable one. And so they hold off until the Chile earthquake shows up, or the Haiti quake shows up, and say, hey folks, that'll happen to you if you don't fall into line. And so they're like, okay, we have to. And so
back to the geometric patterns, whether they're just the streaks across the sky, the checkerboard grid, the diamond grid, or other patterns. Are we able, through your research and time-lapse video, and again, I've often said, days, they're spraying us over Colorado. We may not know anything for 3 days, and then an F-3 drops out of Missouri at 11 o'clock at night 40 hours later. We don't necessarily know that the chemtrails above us are for us.
No, and I'll use an example of Hurricane Sandy.
Okay.
Which impacted the election results a couple of years ago.
Absolutely.
That event began or was heavily engineered, and I could spot the impulse. Sandy would have curved out into the Atlantic, and nobody, trust me, except for the historians at the National Hurricane Center, would even remember Sandy. Wouldn't have been an event unless they were able to generate enough of an impulse, enough of what they call a shortwave storm, to carve out a trough in the East Coast. And so 8 days ahead of Sandy's big event, big arrival, I watched them trailing the holy crap out of this impulse as it was just leaving Russian territory and emerging onto the Aleutian Island chain. It was bloody intense what they were doing to that. And I had a reader write me and say, "Oh God, look at this! They're going to turn Sandy into the coast." And I'm like, I don't know the models say it's going to go out to sea. And then I kind of looked back, and then 14, 15-day forecast. I'm like, oh crap, yeah. So I identified the short wave that would be responsible for doing it, traced it back. Okay, it's this one right here, out in the western Aleutians, and yep, sure as crap, that's what they were doing.
And that's
okay, that's what will happen. Okay. They'll turn that baby inland.
And that's what happened. Scott, we do have calls for you today, 877-254-7524, but we've had a little glitch with the phone lines. Mary, if I dump you, I'll lock the line out, call back in on the back line, but let's see if this works. Mary, are you with us?
Mr. Stevens, I wanted to say, you said this is done all over the world. Does that mean that Chinese are spraying their people and the Russians are spraying their people and the African nations are collected to spray their people? Or is there one central location where the Chinese and the Russians are cooperating with the Americans to do this?
What I don't have are enough photographs of people who have been in Russia or been in China and shared those with me. I think there's some training and some action that does happen over those two countries. I don't believe there's a lot of training that happens over Africa. You simply don't need it. You don't need it unless you want to be very precise and keep the cloud shapes and forms somewhat more natural looking, like they do. And so they kind of keep. I've got pictures from the 80s, before the chemtrail program was this intense, and the clouds were unreal. unreal in their distortion, the magnitude of the distortion, that with the ubiquitous of the iPhones and the cameras and the digital stuff would be all over social media today. So they had to have the chemtrails to keep our clouds, our weather looking, quote unquote, somewhat natural. Now, over these other countries, it happens, and they're subject to weather control. I know they all know it's happening, and this was a big internal dilemma I had within myself, is who's doing it to whom. And my conclusion was that largely there's one central operation, and it's done globally. One central operation. Just like there's there's a plan for war, and both sides are playing it. Whether it's Chinese against America, it doesn't matter. Or Russians against, it doesn't really matter. Everybody's in on it, except for the people. Except for the people.
Hold, Mary. Actually, we got the music here, so I'm going to put everybody on hold real quick. Everybody stay where you are. Phone lines open, 877-254-7524, with our guest Scott Stevens from weatherwars.info.
Reasons to own gold. Brought to you by the Patriot Trading Group at allamericangold.com. Reason number 647.
Most people don't even know that the courts have already ruled. Once money is deposited into the bank owns the money, and the depositor is merely an unsecured creditor of the bank, which means if the bank goes under, you get paid last. After the financial crisis, instead of breaking up too big to fail, the government and the Federal Reserve created Dodd-Frank and made too big to fail banks even bigger, while putting your deposits more at risk. I'm Joe Jaquint, CEO of the Patriot Trading Group. To learn more, visit us at allamericangold.com or call us at 800-951-0592.
Nutritional Balancing by GoHealthyNext.com will expertly assist you in optimizing your metabolism, teach you safe detoxification techniques, and help you rebuild your health. Eileen Durfee, a Dr. Wilson practitioner, specializes in programs and resources that will assist you in repairing your health using scientific methods. If you have fatigue, stress, pain, cravings, inflammation, negative emotions, and adverse reactions, you need to get Nutritional Balancing and GoHealthyNext.com. That's GoHealthyNext.com. GoHealthyNext.com. An emergency preparedness plan for your home, car, school, and office is a must. Knowing how to store water safely, survive extreme temperature changes, provide reliable shelter, first aid, and sanitation is critical. Knowing where to get the best lights, radios, and other supplies is easy. Ferris Survival, located at 3366 South Broadway, is a professional, reputable, full-service business providing realistic preparedness supplies at affordable prices. Stop by, go online, or call 303-781-0343, 866-781-0343. Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits, whether they are of God, because many false prophets have gone into the world. By this you will know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Yeshua, Jesus, has come in the flesh is of God, and every spirit that does not confess that Yeshua, Jesus, has come in the flesh is not of God. And this is the spirit of Antichrist, which you have already heard was coming and is now already in the world. 1 John 4:1.
Welcome back, Babylon, to free America, to break the chains that bind us, to come to a common place, to be on the same page. One of the truth. The truth is not something you believe, the truth is. And we're all big kids. We can take the truth. I'm sick and tired of being lied to by the same people who said the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus were real, who are telling us when it comes to climate change, give them more money and more power and they'll fix it. When simple questions like, why is that plane leaving a streak across the sky and it's not going away, it's only getting bigger? And then they make fun of your tinfoil. Well, we now know in the art of war, first they ignore you, and then they attack you, and then we win. He's been waging the war well over a decade. Weatherwars.info. Joining us back on the phone, Scott Stevens. Scott, thank you for being with us. Mary, I believe you're also still with us, correct?
Yes, I just wanted to ask one last question.
Please do.
Okay. Is the HARP facility in Alaska generating the pulse which powers the force of the air to do this, or is it electromagnetic, or you said it comes from the jets? I mean, how does this work with the facilities that HARP has had?
You know, I think HARP worked very well, and so they built many of them.
Yeah, I was going to say the Alaska facility is a shill.
Yeah, there's many of them in the northern high latitudes, and Australia, New Zealand.
Yeah, around the
they're
world.
going in down low. And I think they'll use those pulses where they'll lift the atmosphere and then it collapses back down. What I don't know is how small a scale this can work at. That I do not know. And I was the last one that interviewed Bernard Eastland before he died in 2007, the end of 2007. And he was very, very unwilling to even broach the topic of weather when it came to HARP. At this point in time, I was writing a paper on electromagnetic fields and thunderstorms because everything rotates. Everything in the sky rotates. The little cumulus cloud rotates.
Scott,
the thunderstorm
was that
rotates.
the paper in which you published the photos of what I guess I called the undulating clouds versus the circular rotation? It was like they were wave clouds, what I call undulating clouds. Is that the article, if I remember right?
No. This one, you would have had to have read the journal National Weather Digest for that.
Sorry.
No worries. But I think that was a new cloud type. That the Met Office in the United Kingdom was publishing, and it was a new undulating type of cloud. And you wouldn't see that cloud if there weren't all of these chemtrail particles in the sky to be such an attractant to moisture, but also to be able to how do I say it? Behave like the sheen of a bubble, where it's just a very, very small layer revealing the undulations in the atmosphere.
Okay.
And this cloud simply didn't exist 20, 30 years ago. And they're saying that, with photography and more eyes in the sky, we're finding this stuff. And I call lunacy on that.
You call Bravo Sierra on that one?
I do.
Mary, does that answer your question?
Well, I'd like him to talk more about what he's been doing, the technology of how they're doing this, so we know what we're looking at. And, okay?
I know exactly what they're doing.
Fair enough.
And we have to go into the esoteric. And that's not a place most people are willing to go.
Well, let's free up the line. And Scott, I tell you what, Mary, let's free up the line. And Scott, why don't you go into this discussion? And I shouldn't be hanging up. Scott, I didn't hang up on you, did I?
No, I'm
we're
still
good.
here.
Okay. So let's go down this path.
Let's have Mary research Orgon Energy, ORGON Energy, and Wilhelm Reich and James Trevor Constable. They're the pioneers in this research. I mean, Wilhelm Reich was murdered by the FDA in the late 50s.
I got to Will Heibright?
Wilhelm Reich. He came over from Germany. Okay. And he was the discoverer of this. It's essentially the life force of the atmosphere. And this is why they can stimulate it with such low wattage and get such immense results, is because this planet's bioenergy is so finely balanced that you load it up with particles, with metal particles, and give it a subtle shock, and it's like putting, 1 watt or 1/10 of a watt against the skin of an earthworm. It's going to convulse. And how you can chase worms out of the soil with just a little bit of wattage.
Since
it's the same with the atmosphere. They can turn over a rainstorm, a thunderstorm. And this guy, James Trevor Constable, was on the freighter ship USS Maui. And back and forth across the Pacific he would go and play with his technology and with the ship's radar. They could time lapse it and they could make it rain and he gave all of his research to every single department of the U.S. government in 1972, and he gave them the keys to how to do this. And as long as meteorologists and the weather professionals are stuck in heat and humidity, thermodynamics as being the driver of this, they'll never understand chemtrails. They'll never understand any of how this works.
So that information has essentially been in the military machine for 43 years.
Every bit of it.
Okay.
Every bit of it. And the FDA knew by killing Wilhelm Reich what they were doing.
All right.
It was the power of the biosphere, of your soul, essentially. So
you had made mention You had made mention that much as a child, there's a famous story. My mother was going ape because there was a tornado warning, and she came home, and I was up on top of the house with a camera taking pictures. And that led to me as a storm chaser for years, which I realized, again, is stupid. And I don't know if you saw the video of the woman covering the thing and the stop sign slammed her in the face. Until a broadcaster has a license plate cut his head off at 200 miles an hour, they're going to keep sticking these idiots in the field, when not to go down the police state path, but we have weather cameras, building cameras, traffic cameras everywhere. We can cover a storm and not put men or women in harm's way of covering the storm. But what I want to...
You know, if they want to go, let them go. You know, and that's just the natural selection. You know, they get taken out, they get taken out. That's natural selection.
That's actually a good point.
I'm very adamant about that, you know, and the progress happens one death at a time.
But one thing I want to bring up is from when you were a child, and again, being mentored into meteorology versus where we are now in the 21st century. And we're going to do that with our guest, Scott Stevens from weatherwars.info when we return.
Great Plains Power has been providing reliable electrical power systems in the Rocky Mountain area since 1992. Our systems rely on the sun to help make you self-reliant for your power needs. Solar energy can be scaled to fit any situation, from complete power independence to backup power for the short term. Our expertise focuses on standalone power, but we have extensive experience with utility interactive systems as well. Custom-tailored capabilities as modest as emergency lighting all the way to commercial-scale power. Great Plains Power is a full-service company. We service everything we sell. We provide and design turnkey packages, custom-designed system, and parts for do-it-yourself. With more than 20 years of specialized experience at your disposal, let us know what your power concerns or goals are. Reach us by phone or the internet. Call 303-239-9963. That's 303-239-9963. Or go to greatplainssolar.com. Mary Sando House in Boulder reminds us each year thousands of senior citizens are put at high risk due to extreme weather conditions. If you know of a senior alone, check regularly on their health and welfare. Your time will assure their safety. This message from Mary Sando House, 1244 Gillespie Drive in Boulder. To see how they can assist you or a loved one, call 303-494-7317. Mention this message and receive a free assessment. That's 303-494-7317.
Article 4. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall be issued but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the places to be searched and the persons or things to be seized.
And I want to bring him back real quick for a look back to the past, where we are now, and where he sees the chemtrail evolution going. So, Scott, you'd mentioned again, you know, like at 12, and you were being mentored already and by the time you were a sophomore, you're live on the air, and I'm sorry, sophomore in college, and you're live on the air, and you're doing what you love doing, and you're doing the noon, the 5, the 6, the 10 o'clock. And you and I, again, on your Facebook page, we relatively share the same genre of age group. When we were kids, tornadoes fell out of the sky between 4:30 in the afternoon and 7 o'clock at night. Is that a fair assumption to say?
If you were to, statistically do an analysis, you'd probably hit 80% of the tornadoes between 3 and 6 p.m.
Okay. Why are we seeing F3s drop out of the sky between 11:30 at night and 1:30 in the morning?
Because Because we're dealing with eco-terrorism.
Period. So
it isn't natural weather any longer. There is no natural weather left. We have this planet trying to do what she wants to do, and it can't. It does not have her own breath. It's like a teenager stuck on a respirator. And if it wants to do this, it's electrocuted back into the bed or back to doing this or that. It's not healthy. And at some point, I promise you, Dan, I promise you, the earth will revolt, and it will not be pretty. These people, these elite, are going to be holed up underground, and I promise you, this earth will turn itself over to rid it of this darkness. And it will turn itself over.
And at that point, can the earth rejuvenate itself, or have we done too much damage?
You bet it can. Just like any teenager in a car accident. It'll be ugly for a while.
I don't want to bring up the conspiracy, but we know ATC 0 after 9/11. The skies were never bluer, they were never cleaner, and we know why. Because they couldn't get away with chemtrailing for 3 days. And I don't want to...
And our diurnal change, the difference between the high and low temperature across this country alone, widened by 3 degrees. Global warming is wholly, and climate change is wholly an affair of this geoengineering. And I will go to the grave saying that.
So as Americans, the more we stop, again, make fun of what you don't know, fine, but this affects all of us, period. Whether you make $12,000 a year or $12 million a minute, it affects us. And so I guess ultimately through the radical, peaceful bombardment via social media of sites like yours to continue to educate the public, is that the direction we need to be taking?
I think that's where we are for a time, is we're in a function of educating each other and spreading awareness. And once this threshold is reached, despite the controlling aspect of the press, because we don't have a free press, we haven't had journalism in many, many years. There hasn't been true investigative journalism.
No.
Unless the powers that be want to go after somebody, then we have an expose. But only then. Only then. And until we get journalism back, it's up to us sharing information amongst friends and family and acquaintances and trying to get that message out there. So I applaud you for what you're doing on the air.
God bless you for your work over there at weatherwars.info. Keep up the great job. Keep up the great work, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You as well. The American Freedom Network, 1360 The Lion, KHNC Denver, Johnstown. I'm Dan Wilde. I'm off to the NRA dinner. We'll see you Sunday, 2 to 5, right here, of course, on 1360.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Tom Phillips, founder of the Green Herb.
How many times have you gone into a health food store and are confused as to the many different brands and prices on the same herbal supplements? You want to buy the cheapest, but you're afraid that quality is less, so you buy the most expensive. Truth is, the cheapest may be better. Green Herb herbal supplements are all manufactured in our Wheat Ridge, Colorado plant at 4565 Kipling Street using the highest quality herbs that we source from all over the world. Our 100